Hello, this is a change from my usual format. As you can see, there's somebody else on camera next to me. So this is a departure from my usual one-person format commentary. So today I'm going to be speaking in the first of what will hopefully be a series of interviews with author Logan Albright, who got up nice and early to speak to me from New York. And very glad to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. Well, interesting to note that actually we have books with the same publisher, John Hunt Publishing, and specific imprint, Moon Books.
That's correct. We do.
So you've a book coming out in, I think is it November?
It's the end of November. It's December 1st. So it'll be just in time for the holidays.
Okay. So I have a copy of it here, which you very kindly sent me. And yeah, very interesting, rather unusual book. And yeah, if you didn't see it on the screen there, it's called Conform or Be Cast Out. And I must confess, I haven't read the whole book yet, but it looks very interesting, tracing non-conformity, I suppose, back to the original Christian non-conformist, or rather biblical non-conformist, Lucifer being cast out up to modern day. And I think you covered the satanic panic as one of the more recent episodes of hysteria. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to see how much society dislikes people who don't conform to it. And I wanted to explore specifically the trend of identifying those people with devil worshippers and Satanists and demon summoners and all these other things that has happened over the years, because it's a recurring theme you see over and over again. And I don't think anybody else has done that. So that's what I was interested in looking at.
Yeah, it is very unusual and also quite an interesting idea for the times we're in at the moment, where non-conformity can come with quite a heavy price, which I'll move on to that in a minute. But anyway, yeah, looks like a very interesting book. So maybe something to put on your Christmas, or so if you don't believe in Christmas, solstice buying list. So we've had a little chat before, and one of the things that interested me was the fact that you describe yourself as a libertarian, and I would be very much a libertarian as well, which unfortunately at the moment seems to be something of an unpopular viewpoint to be an adherent to. I would sort of say I'd be typified as a what in Europe, a left-wing libertarian, and you'd be a little bit more sort of center or conservative. Would that be right?
Well, I certainly came from that direction. I was more conservative in my youth. I wouldn't really call myself a conservative now, but I think if people were trying to group me in either left or right libertarianism, I'd fall more closely on the right. But I think it's sort of an odd divide, because a lot of the things that the left, at least in America, are for, or very passionately for, I'm also for. Things like legalizing drugs and having open immigration and letting people have whatever kind of relationships between consenting adults they want to have. All that stuff that the left has traditionally been for, I'm very much in favor of. So it's interesting that I get classified on the right, because I don't think I have that much in common with the American right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I tend to agree that, I mean, I would like a lot of the things that are on the left, but there would be some things that I actually agree with that are classed as right wing. So I would see overall I very much fall into the left wing camp, but there are exceptions. And I mean, the reality of life is things are a lot more nuanced than just left, right, and
Yes.
these is that everyone wants to put you into.
It's odd that it's a controversial philosophy, because to me it's very, very simple. And it's just, I object to the use of violence or the initiation of violence against people. I think it's better if we cooperate. It's better if we consent than being forced to do things. It's better for human interaction to be voluntary rather than coerced. I don't know why that's a controversial statement. It seems pretty obvious to me that that's better, but not very many people in America like that viewpoint these days.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, conflict resolution generally involves sort of dialogue. It doesn't involve like two people and a hammer each bashing each other's heads and that's not how you resolve the conflict. That in generally I'd say most societies around the world would regard conflict as something as a last resort. I remember reading The Art of War, Sun Tzu, when I was a bit younger, and said the best way to win any battle is to avoid the battle altogether and find another solution to your problem. And I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. Any kind of conflict, even if it's just intellectual conflict, does require a lot of energy and resources, and obviously physically that's going to require even more resources.
Yeah, and I think those resources are best organized when people do it on a voluntary basis rather than being told what to do by a central authority. One of the things that is central to my libertarianism is this belief in decentralization and the idea that one person doesn't have as much knowledge or as much insight into the way the world works as a million people or 350 million people in the case of the United States. So assuming that one person or one committee or one government body can solve these problems when instead of just devolving the decision making down to the local level seems very strange to me. I think you get better answers when you let everybody work on the problem instead of just having a few so-called experts work on it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Now, I was going to ask you about the nature of disagreement. I mean, here it's quite a small country. Things have changed a bit. There's a lot of disagreement in politics, especially at the moment. And certainly in the UK, that seems to have got very aggressive. And I did spend a brief time in America. I think I was living there for about roughly 6 months, working and then traveling. And at the time, I didn't notice people talking about politics. This would have been back in about 1991. It wasn't a big topic at the time. And if it did come up, there didn't seem to be this level of aggression. Would you agree with me that things have changed enormously in the last 20 to 30 years in terms of disrespect and the level of disagreement?
Yeah, it's gotten really bad. And I don't know what exactly the cause of it is. I think a lot of it has to do with social media and the internet because, yeah, you're right. We didn't used to talk about politics quite so much. And now it's everything. It's every aspect of your life has to be influenced by politics. You don't go a day without hearing about it. And I think it kind of started around the end of the second Bush term, which would have been 2006, 2007 is when people started getting really obsessed with it. And it's just gotten worse ever since. And now it's everything. And people don't want to be your friend if they disagree with you on your politics. People don't want you to be able to be allowed to speak. They want to deplatform you if they don't agree with your politics. And I think it's a very bad road to go down because I think, in America, we have the Constitution, which guarantees freedom of speech, which means that the government can't pass laws abridging freedom of speech. But it's more than that. It's also a culture of like accepting debate and dialogue and letting people talk their differences out. And that's starting to go away, where people don't even want to have the conversation. They say, no, my way is right. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to block you. I'm going to go after you, try to get you fired from your job, have all kinds of retribution against you because I don't agree with what you have to say. And that's a really dangerous place to be in. And it scares me that people are thinking that's a good thing for society.
I totally agree. And I can say personally, I've suffered from that. I think it's something that's actually become quite prevalent in the pagan movement, unfortunately. When I first became involved in sort of the esoteric world, that didn't seem to be an issue at all. People, in my experience, I can only really speak for myself, didn't really talk about politics very much. And I've noticed it's gradually crept up over a period of years. As you say, I'd probably say the early 2000s is when it started, I think. But it's sort of gone on sort of a gradual, sort of like a J curve, becoming exponential in recent years, I think. I find that worrying. And, I've had people block me. I've been unfriended. And I don't think I have radical views. I'm quite centrist, really. And I've been blocked simply for defending people's right to speak, for defending libertarianism, defending people having freedom of speech. And have you had any similar experiences?
I haven't been blocked or harassed personally yet, but I do notice that it's a trend in the pagan groups that I hang out with. There's sort of a chilling atmosphere where you don't really want to say what you think. You know that if you disagree with the majority, you're not really welcome to speak your mind, or it's going to cause problems. It's going to cause fights. And, I want to have a separation between the different aspects of my life personally. The reason I want to be involved in paganism is a different reason from why I want to be involved in politics. And I want to keep those things separate because I have very many very good friends in the pagan movement who I want to keep as friends. And we may disagree on politics, but I don't want to fight about it. I'm like, it's fine. You can have your view and I can have my view. That's totally okay. But I feel like you have to be very careful what you say, because it's assumed that you agree with everybody when you're in the group. And I think that it would be a real problem if you actually did say what you thought. And so that it does worry me. And I have seen a little bit of it. It hasn't been too bad personally so far, but I know it's going in that direction.
Yeah, I would say it is quite unhealthy because, like you, I want to separate politics from religion. And I'm very aware of the history of religion and the very difficult fight to achieve secularism. And obviously that's mostly in a Christian environment, but also in Islam as well, and to a small extent in Judaism, and perhaps many other religions. But particularly with Christianity, it was a really difficult fight to achieve secularism. And I don't see why we should go backwards, but coming from the other perspective where it's the politics coming into spirituality. And it's nobody's business what your spirituality is or what your political beliefs are. That's your own private business. And you shouldn't be obliged to disclose either of them to anybody if you don't want to, I think.
Totally agree. And, many people have come to believe that if you disagree with them on a certain issue, you're a bad person, or you're a hateful person, or you're a bigot, or you are some kind of threat to the peaceful society. And that's one of the reasons it's become so toxic, is because they think, no, we can't tolerate this. This is so evil. This is so hateful that we can't tolerate these views. And like, my views are not hateful or evil at all. I want to love everybody and have everybody live in peace and cooperation and have a good time. I don't want to persecute anybody. I want everybody to live the life they want to live. I have no interest in anything that resembles persecution. But I know that if I said what I believe on a lot of things, it would be called hate speech, and I would be called a hateful person. And it's just such a misunderstanding of the other side, because there's no hate behind it at all. Totally unmotivated by hate. It's all motivated by love.
Yeah, that's very good. It reminds me of a term you don't hear very much anymore, something that used to come up in debate a lot, and is the term devil's advocate. And I mean, I've been criticized for taking that role on. And I remember, things like at school, you would have a debate about some issue. It could be anything. It could be about, whether electric cars are a good idea. It could be about abortion. It could be anything, and you'd have two sides. And I remember at school, one group were told to take this particular view and the opposite group take the other, regardless of what they personally believed. And then you would have the teacher being in the middle, sort of trying to play devil's advocate, and you'd have a debate. And that was a really healthy practice, because it kind of taught people debating skills. And if people did start getting out of order, it was sort of what they say now is, use your words or whatever,
Right.
So don't stoop to swearing or, threats of violence, whatever, you explain your position. If you want to win someone over, the idea was that you convince them with the strength of your argument, not by, threatening them with, knocking their block off or something. So, I mean, how do you feel about that whole concept of a devil's advocate? Do you think it's something that's dying off, or?
Oh, definitely. And you make a really good point about the importance of debate and discussion, because that's how you're never going to get to truth unless you're able to talk about ideas and push them back and forth and test them and make sure they hold up to scrutiny. You need someone to challenge the ideas. It's the same way with the scientific method, right? You put forth a theory or a hypothesis, and it's the job of everybody else to try to tear it down. And if they can't tear it down, then you've done a good job and you've come up with a good theory. And that's the way it is with all ideas, whether they're scientific in nature or not. And if we don't allow that process to happen, you can't expect to find the truth ever. You're just going to have, I think there's a real irony in it, because you're just going to have what resembles a religious dogma, where this is what we say is true. You're not allowed to question it. You're not allowed to ask about it. You're not allowed to put forth opposing views. You just have to accept it as true. And if you don't, we're going to ostracize you. Like, how can you ever expect to get to the truth using that method? It makes me wonder if they're actually interested in what the truth is, or if they're interested in just imposing their will on other people. It's just a power game. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it often is a power game and a desire to impose a certain viewpoint. When I was a student at university, I had a wonderful lecturer, probably the only lecturer who was any good, who introduced me to a load of good philosophers and writers, like Buckminster Fuller and Erasmus and Alvin Toffler. And anyway, he said, groupthink is very much a problem. When you get any society, you get any organization, once you have a hierarchy established and certain people who may be very charismatic in terms of leadership, you tend to get this groupthink occurring and end up with an echo chamber eventually, if it's not challenged by anybody else. I've seen that myself. And what do you think about that idea?
Oh, totally. It's the siloing off, which is largely a function of the internet, I think. I see it all the time, like on my Facebook friends page, someone will post what I consider to be kind of a controversial opinion on their Facebook wall, and everyone will agree with them. And then one person will disagree, and they always act shocked that someone would disagree with them. And I'm like, why are you posting your opinion publicly if you don't expect people to disagree with it? If you just want everyone to pat you on the back and say, yes, you said the true thing, you said the right thing, there's no point in even doing it. And it amazes me the extent to which people are surprised when some of their friends disagree with them. I think there's a real misunderstanding among people on the, I don't know what you call it, the progressive left, the kind of cancel culture mob, the woke people, whatever we want to call them these days. They believe that they are morally right and that everyone agrees with them and they have truth on their side. And they're always surprised when people don't agree with them, and it upsets them. And like, I have friends of every political persuasion, and I like them all, and I don't judge them for being wrong on things from my point of view. And I'm happy to hear their points of view. And I really make an effort to try to hear them out and kind of see where they're coming from when I disagree with them, and not just say you're wrong, but say, oh, I understand why you think that, even though I don't agree ultimately. But there's not that same reciprocity going on the other side. It's just, no, this is what's true. And if you disagree, you must be a bigot. And that's really scary.
Yeah, I found that too. I mean, I have a small number of friends on the right, and I don't agree with them, but I respect their viewpoint. I have quite a lot of friends in the middle, and I have some sort of where I am, and then some further to the left. And unfortunately, it's the ones that are on the furthest left seem to be the ones who are, in fact, bigoted and intolerant and unwilling to listen to other people's viewpoint, which is really unfortunate because, this kind of obsession with political correctness has led them to become what I'd see as rather, dogmatic and authoritarian in their thinking. And this, the left traditionally was quite sort of a place for dissidents and dissenters, like Solzhenitsyn from Russia.
Yes. Yes.
And he's one of my favorite writers. I mean, it really impacted on my thinking reading his works. And dissent is healthy in my opinion. But unfortunately, some of these people, I mean, I've managed to stay friends with some of them. Some of them have disowned me because, I don't take their line. But they seem to have abandoned the concept of, the dissenter or the dissident being somebody that's valuable in society.
Yeah, and it's changing so fast as well. You have people who were like heroes of the left 5-10 years ago who are now being reviled and called bigots, like the second wave feminists, the people who fought for all these women's rights issues, are now being attacked because they don't not fully on board with the trans activism stuff. You have people like I don't know, Steven Pinker or Richard Dawkins are getting in trouble. Like these are heroes of the left, and it's amazing that in such a short amount of time, this, what was the accepted dogma of the left has now been replaced by something completely new and alien, and that these people are being left behind. And it's changing so fast that I don't think anybody can keep up. And I think it takes a real hubris to just discard all the past truths that were accepted on the left immediately within a couple years and say, no, we have the new truth now. This is the correct way of thinking. All those people who, what they thought 5 years ago were all wrong. Like, give it some time. Let these ideas evolve organically. But it's just they're so quick to just discard all their old ideas in favor of new ones. And I think that's takes a lot of arrogance to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of arrogance. And also, I personally think there's unwanted side effects of being so authoritarian. And that, I think, is actually, a gift to the people on the extreme right, in that it's pushing people who may be quite centrist, perhaps towards the far right more, when they probably would have had no interest whatsoever. So rather than actually sort of putting things to the left or to the center, I personally believe it's creating this massive polarization.
That's a very good point and very true. I mean, that's what got Donald Trump elected here in the United States, is people were so afraid of the rapid advance of the critical race theory and things like that in the United States, that they had a candidate who was saying bad things about those things, and they were willing to overlook all the other terrible things about him in order to vote for him, because they were reactionary against something that they were afraid of. And I've seen it with a lot of people that I formerly respected and was friends with. They've gone so far right now, and they've become crazy nationalists. And I'm like, I have no use for nationalism any more than I do for communism. So, I'm very sad to see that, but it's certainly happening. Like, you're getting this upswell of far right. I don't really want to use the word extremism because they're not violent or anything, but you're getting this upswell of far right thought, which is really unhealthy, just as the same way you're getting the upswell of far left thoughts. It's really unhealthy.
Yeah. And what's funny to me is that no one wants to discuss it. I think most people are too frightened actually to discuss this issue, because although a lot of people are aware of this, they're worried about being criticized if they say anything. So I think there's a sort of rump of people in the middle, sort of maybe slightly left, slightly right, who are actually pretty much the silent majority, because they're worried about being criticized by both the right and the left. And people are now, to a large extent, terrified to stick their head, above the parapet in case they get shot at. Metaphorically, I mean.
Yes, it's a tyranny of a very small minority, but they've been so vocal and so vociferous in going after people that the vast majority of people who may not agree with them are just afraid to say anything. They'd rather keep their head down and not get in trouble, because they've seen what happens to people who do. Anybody who pops their head up gets knocked down again like a whack-a-mole. And it's very scary to people, and people can lose their jobs, and they can lose their friends, and they can lose their livelihoods. And I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where I'm not worried about losing my job based on what I say, as long as I remain reasonable. And so I'm able to speak out about this stuff. But a lot of people can't. People who work retail, people who work in restaurants, they can't really say what they think. They have to just keep their head down, because the consequences have been shown to be so dire for people who don't go along with this very small minority.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. And from my observations, there seems to be an increasingly large role played by big tech, who seem to be taking on a very authoritarian stance. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a real problem. And it's kind of a debate we're having in the United States among our libertarian movement, because there's a certain faction of libertarians that are like, as long as private enterprise is doing it and it's not the government, it's fine. And I think that's very short-sighted. I don't think that's the correct way to look at it. Private censorship is still censorship. Private suppression of speech is still suppression of speech. And we should want to live in a society where people feel free to speak their minds and say what they believe, regardless of whether it's being done through a law or through social pressure or through being ostracized or being not allowed to go into your favorite restaurant or grocery store or whatever, concert venue. It's a bad way our society is going, and we need to fight back against it. And I'm saddened to see a lot of my libertarian allies saying, well, it's not the government, so it's not our concern. We're not worried about it. I don't think that's the correct way to look at it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In fact, Russell Brand has said certain things about this, and he's rightly pointed out the hypocrisy of corporations. somebody like, I don't know, a company like Nike perhaps, or somebody like that, who may have supported BLM, but at the same time they'll be using people of color in some obscure country to make trainers or whatever for like, 2 cents a day. And they don't see the irony of that, that they actually don't support people in their day-to-day running of the business in the way that they espouse politically.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's all just signaling. They want to convince people that they're on their side and that they support them without actually having to do anything. It's easy to put up a rainbow flag or a BLM flag or something, but to actually change their business practices, they're not going to do that. And it amazes me that people buy into it and people think, oh, they really care about us. They're a good company. Like Disney has been a really bad, egregious actor in this. They say all the right things, but then they do all this business in China where all these human rights abuses are happening, and they don't care about that. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on all around.
Yeah, I'm absolutely amazed that so many people fall for this and don't realize that these companies actually have all kinds of heinous practices. And, I'd seen, I think it was Coca-Cola had done something along those lines recently. But, they do their best to conceal the fact that, they go into certain countries and avail of the water to make their drinks and end up depriving sort of local and indigenous communities of valuable drinking water to the point where rivers are running dry. And then, there might be a private security firm that looks after the factory or whatever. And next thing you know, there's been an unfortunate accident with the lead protester has sort of fallen off a cliff or accidentally ran into a bullet. And of course, companies like that, they're going to say, oh, it's nothing to do with us. We didn't do that. It was a different company. But we all know at the end of the day that they're going to protect their business interests. So, I mean, it's really obvious to me that they don't actually care. And a lot of people interested in politics would have probably been well aware of this in the past. But how is it possible that people seem to have no longer make this connection between what they're saying publicly and what they're doing?
It's a question I've been wrestling with for a long time, and I feel like the analogy that I use is basically politics is team sports. It doesn't actually matter what the issues are, what the policies are, what the things people claim to care about are. It's, are you wearing the right color shirt? The same way you would. It doesn't matter whether your football team is from the city that they're representing. It doesn't matter whether the owner is from that city. It doesn't matter whether any of the money comes from that city. It doesn't matter any of that. It's just they have to be wearing the right color shirt. And that's kind of the way it is here. It's like, you're on my team or you're not on my team. And that's all it is. And so people don't really look at these things and they don't make rational decisions about them because they just want to know, well, what side are my team on? And I'll just be on that side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. Yeah, it's sort of going back to the group thing again, where, you picked your side and you have to support your side no matter what, no matter how stupid comments made are, or ridiculous, heinous actions that somebody does. You still have to support them because they're on your team. And I think we're seeing that a lot in politics around the world at the moment.
Oh yeah, I mean, I work fairly closely in politics a lot of the time, and it just sickens me whenever the presidency changes hands and you see everybody who was complaining about a policy now happy about the exact same policy, and vice versa. Everybody who was happy about the policy now complaining about it because the person in office has a D or an R next to his name and it has changed. And I'm like, you clearly don't actually care about the thing you say you care about, because the same thing is happening under both of these men. But now you're saying it's okay when before it was bad, and now you're saying it's bad when before it was okay.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you got the same problem happening in other countries too, like in Britain and in Ireland as well. That can happen. Where you've got two almost identical parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and you get the various supporters sort of, oh no, they're terrible. But if you look at their policies, they're almost completely identical. Mm-hmm. And they've managed to keep out the other parties by having a sort of very unpopular coalition at the moment. And I think the penny is dropping, that basically they are identical. So maybe for once, the Civil War politics, which has been going for about 100 years, may come to an end very soon, hopefully. But it is amazing how it's just, as you say, a matter of branding more than actually what you're selling to the public.
Yeah, I really have no predictions on where this is going or how it's going to end. I could see it kind of blowing over and people getting tired of it and realizing it's ridiculous and within the next few years. And I could see it getting much, much worse. And we could end up like, Venezuela or something. It scares me, but I try to be an optimist. I'm an optimist by temperament. And so even when I get upset about things or down, I always try to remember that we actually have it pretty good. We're much wealthier than anyone in history and much better off in terms of health than anyone in history. And so, I try to look on the bright side of things and not be too alarmed, but it is scary and I don't know where it's headed. I could easily see it going very badly, very quickly, or maybe it won't.
Yeah, well, I tend to agree. I try to be optimistic and I'm hopeful that things will change. And as you point out, we are in a time period where, we've got in Western countries, certainly unimaginable wealth compared to what people would have experienced, even a century or less ago. So I wanted to move on a little bit to talking about conformity again,
Sure.
about how do you think we can go about resisting this drive towards conformism?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer, but I think the thing that, over the last year that has really woken me up is how susceptible everybody is to fear. I didn't realize, and it was a shock to me, that everyone is just on the knife edge of being deathly afraid all the time. And politicians and corporations can use that fear to get people to do pretty much whatever they want. And so we need some kind of resilience to be built up among people to not be so afraid of things. And I don't really know how you do that. It's a big order. It's like a big ask. How do we get people to be less afraid and more confident in their own views and their own opinions? And we're going to live life how we want to live it and not worry about the consequences. I don't know how you get people there, but I think it has to be an education campaign more than anything and tell people, look, you're pretty safe. Things are pretty good. You really shouldn't be so afraid of everything. And the things you're giving up in order to kind of satiate this fear are very valuable. And once you give them up, you can't get them back.
Yeah, that tends to be how things go. This sort of kind of death by 1,000 cuts where they take away certain rights and more, and you agree to this and this and this. I suppose it's popular terminology is the boiling frog syndrome.
Right.
They gradually strip away things from you. But I would agree that fear is a major factor in people's, maybe desire is the wrong word, but their decision to conform. So, I mean, how you overcome fear is an interesting question. I mean, this has got obviously political and social implications, but I find it's also got sort of esoteric, spiritual aspects to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For instance, yourself, if say, for instance, you were having some kind of problems, say somebody sent you a curse or you were attacked by an entity, if you're fearful, the likelihood of success is far greater. If you're without fear, the chances are that you will get through it unscathed. So I would have thought from a practitioner's point of view, the esoteric community would see that that these two things sort of go hand in hand, and I would hope that they would apply this knowledge to the conformity that's creeping in with politics, etc. But I don't see it happening much myself.
I was very surprised and dismayed not to see it as well. I thought for sure, it's so much a part of the people I hang out with in my practice is like dealing with dark things, figuring out ways to cope with life, figuring out ways to cope with dark thoughts, meditation, centering, grounding, mindfulness, all that kind of stuff that people do. And I mean, it's supposed to have an effect and make you less fearful of the world and more confident in yourself and stronger and feeling like you're unconquerable. and it doesn't seem to be working for a lot of people, because I was very surprised to see nobody really have that attitude.
Well, I'd say it does work to a certain extent, but I think one of the problems is a huge exposure to the media, to watching television, to reading newspapers, reading magazines, the social media. I think, say for instance, you started your day, you did some yoga, or you did a meditation, and you'll feel grounded and you're not frightened. The exposure to all of that for a number of hours in a day, I'd imagine that can completely undo all of that work you've done. I don't watch an awful lot. I don't actually watch television at all, so I can't really speak from experience. But would you imagine that's probably the reason why these things are not working?
Oh, definitely. People are so misinformed and just unaware of what actually is going on here because they listen to the mainstream media all day long, and you get bombarded every second of every day, whether it's on television, whether it's on the radio, whether it's on the internet, on Facebook, on Twitter. You get bombarded with scare tactics. And it's like all the stories are exaggerated. All of them are ridiculously blown out of proportion headlines to try to get you to click on them, because like that's the currency of the internet, right? Is clicks, attention, eyeballs. So they want to make it as sensational as possible to get you to look at it. And people see that and they just don't have any clue as to how this industry works. Like, I think people are really naive and thinking, oh, they're telling us the truth. Well, they're telling you what they want, what they think will get you to click on the article. That's what they're telling you. And so for your cells in that regard. And I think that I try to cut young people some slack. I'm a little older than a lot of the people that I'm complaining about. And I think that, they've grown up in this age and they haven't really figured out yet that, you're not supposed to believe this stuff. You're not supposed to take it seriously. And I feel bad for them because I think nobody told them when they were growing up, yeah, that's just marketing. Like, don't listen to that. That's not real. And they hear all this stuff and they think it's real and they think the end of the world is coming. And the end of the world isn't coming. But I think a lot of people are like genuinely terrified because they just don't know any better. And I think parents have been very derelict in teaching their kids, just ignore all that. That's not real life. That's just the internet. That's just the media. It's not real.
Yeah, that's very good advice, actually. And yeah, it is kind of dereliction of duty in a way. But I think maybe some parents just aren't aware of that. They haven't sort of realized that that's what's happening, and that's why they haven't explained it. I suppose in order to deal with a problem, you have to be aware that it exists in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
I think maybe a lot of parents don't realize this is part of the problem. So, I mean, we're coming to the end now, really. But I wanted to ask you, do you think there's limits to freedom of speech?
Not really. I'm pretty much an absolutist on it. I mean, I think overt threats of violence is a limit, obviously. Anything that, and like fraudulent speech, I think there's a certain limit there, although you have to be careful there because what one person's false advertising might be another person's just legitimate opinion. But in general, I'm pretty much an absolutist, and I think people should be allowed to say whatever they want to say as long as they're not directly threatening violence.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I draw the line at incitement of violence, and direct sort of hatred. I mean, a lot of people have suggested that, it's in the benefit of society to restrict and to censor, but then that's just really the beginning of a slippery slope, in my opinion. And I think the best way it's been suggested is to deal with unreasonable and inhumane opinions is through debate, through argument, through
absolutely.
Of
the cure for bad speech is more speech, not less speech. And you have to always remember that if you're going to put restrictions on speech, like it has to be someone's opinion, someone has to be in charge of deciding, well, that opinion's okay and that opinion's not okay. And people always think it's going to be their guy who decides, it's going to be my appointed bureaucrat who's going to decide what's okay and what's not okay. But as we saw in the last 4 years in America, you don't know who's going to be in charge. It could be Donald Trump who could be in charge. Do you really want Donald Trump deciding what is okay to say and what's not okay to say? I don't. And so I don't want to give anybody that power.
No, and I agree. I don't think you'd want to allow Joe Biden that either. And right. I mean, I've fallen out with people a bit over, US politics, but I just point out actually neither of them are very good, in my opinion. I think they're both laughable. You've got two men in their 70s who are very privileged and wealthy. And, what do they actually know about some, poor person living in Louisiana, say, who's 21 years old? Their lives couldn't be further apart. And so I don't think that either of them are in any way representative of the majority. So, I mean, it's quite laughable, if either of them had the power to censor everyone, it would be ridiculous, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's what people forget about is they always say, "Oh, it'd be nice if people didn't say hateful things." Well, it's like, well, someone has to decide what's hateful and what's not hateful, and the person doing the deciding is not necessarily the person you want it to be.
Yeah, that is the big trouble. If someone has to be an arbiter, how can you guarantee that they're going to be impartial, that they're going to be fair, or that they're not going to be corrupt in their decision making? That's a very difficult thing to guarantee, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I would say impossible.
Yeah, I tend to agree, kind of verging towards impossible. Anyway, this has been a really refreshing conversation because it's not something I get to do with people, and certainly not in public. A lot of these conversations I've had with people have been private. So, maybe I'm slightly insane for actually doing this publicly, but I think it's really important that people actually do publicly discuss these concepts and actually put it out there that these are matters that need open discussion rather than sweeping under the table.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful. I really enjoy the opportunity to speak with people like yourself, who I'm sure we would have many disagreements if we dug down into it, but like you're very reasonable, obviously. And I like to think I'm reasonable, and we can talk about issues and we can disagree without being disagreeable, as the statement goes.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on and being my first guest. And I'll just show the book again, which is out, as you said, at the very beginning of December. And it's a very interesting read and quite in depth, and also quite challenging for people maybe that aren't used to looking at this, and something that I think really is an important book for these times, because we are sort of in uncharted territory at the moment.
Well, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. All the best. Thanks a million.